Hey folks, Dustin Zarni here, Democratic Elections Commissioner for Onondaga County. Welcome to Commissioner in a Car. Today is Sunday, November 30th. And this week's Commissioner in a Car is, what method did people choose to vote by? Well, did Onondaga County choose to vote by in 2025? It's kind of the last of my mini blogs I released yesterday, and we talked about the methods in which people voted in 2025. And that'll be my special topic for this week's Commissioner in a Car. But first, let's take a look at the last week at the Onondaga County Board of Elections, what we did. And, well, the last week was all about getting ready for state certification. So New York State Board of Elections had a certification date of November 29th. Well, actually, it's New York State election law that requires all counties to certify their election winners to the New York State Board of Elections along with their vote totals. Now, that certification is actually a limited certification. And what I mean by that is it has the names and vote totals and line numbers and all of that. What it doesn't have on there is the individual write-in names. That still has to be done. Although this last week we made tremendous progress on that. In fact, we finished it, so we're sure of the number of write-ins. However, now we have to go through it next week and make sure that anybody who's not eligible to receive a vote does not. And that is mainly due to fictional characters, although we got most of those in this last week. But the other thing is that the Onondaga County Legislature and the city of Syracuse have residency requirements where you have to live in the district for 1 year inside the city of Syracuse. And for the Onondaga County Legislature, you have to have lived in the district for since at the time of filing petitions, which was last April. And because of that, any write-ins that are for people that don't live in the district, they are invalid votes. And we actually have to go through those races and pull out the ones. And we will look up each name that got write-ins and see if we can find a resident in that district. And so we can assume that that's the person. Now, what's interesting about write-ins is sometimes we have things like Beyonce or even myself or Kevin Ryan has gotten a couple, but we may not live in the districts that people are voting for us for. And for the most part, that doesn't usually matter as long as it's a real person, because technically the law, as we discussed many times with the Liverpool mayoral race, but the law is that you have to live in the district at the time of taking the oath for office, and which is the day before you actually take office, and that's usually January 1st. Although some villages take office in December. That's a whole nother story. So we have to go through these for those districts, and that we just didn't have time to get done before the Thanksgiving weekend. And we did have a certification deadline of November 29th. So that's what we concentrated on this last week. We had hundreds of write-ins. It's always the case. You know, we're a big county. We're a top 5 county, top 6 county in New York State, 300,000 voters, 93,000 people cast votes, many different races. We have to go through them one by one, line by line, to make sure. We also prepared for our hand counts. As you maybe remember, last week's Commissioner in a Car, we had 2 races that qualified for the hand count: the Onondaga Town Council race and the Solvay Village trustee race. Those 2 races ended up being 15 votes, separating the second place Martin Brown third place Martin Brown, the Democrat, the Republican. I'm sorry, I should have got that name down before I got on here, but I forgot. But it doesn't matter. The Democrat is trailing Republican for the second town council seat in Onondaga Town Board by 15 votes out of 6,000 votes cast. That's well within the 0.5% margin. I think it's like 0.12% or something like that. So it's definitely going to be hand counted next week. We've already notified the parties. And we also have the Solvay Village Ward Trustee. That's only 13 votes, but it's only 600 votes cast. So that's over the 0.5%. But because New York says 20 votes, anything under 20 votes, no matter the margin, we have to count. We're going to be counting that one as well. And again, that one, we see that the Democrat incumbent, Mr. McVicker, is trailing by 13 votes there. And you may remember 4 years ago, he won that race by like 10, 12 votes. So it's a very close district. It's always been. And we'll be hand counting those as well. So that's starting next week. So that's what we did at the Board of Elections this last week. So let's get into the special topic this week, and that's by what method did Onondaga County vote in 2025? Well, there's several different options to vote in New York now. The five main categories are early in-person voting, early mail voting, absentee voting, election day voting, and affidavit balloting. Now, early in-person voting, that's when you go to the 10 early voting spots that we have in Onondaga County and show up in person, you're in the book, you're qualified to vote, you get a ballot printed, and you vote in the machine. That's early in-person voting. Early mail, and there was 17,218 people did that option, which was, let me get my spreadsheet in front of me here. Oops, wrong spreadsheet. Sorry. That was approximately, sorry. Let's, oh man. Okay. All right. I thought I had this all teed up. Well, I'll go through the numbers. The 17,218, voters. So then, early mail balloting, that's where you do not need an excuse, to vote by mail, and anybody can do it, but it's a 1-year thing. That was 1,587 voters. Now, these are people who actually returned their ballots. There is a lot more that requested it, and I'll go over that in a future weekly wonk section. But right now, that's what I had was 1,587 voters. So that is what we had there. So the next one we had was absentee balloting. That's the traditional vote by mail, the one that's been around forever in New York. Early vote by mail started in 2023. Absentee voting has been around as part of the constitutional. This allows people to have an excuse to vote by mail, and that is man, I thought I had this. Sorry. I'm going that's the problem with doing these live videos is sometimes I thought I had something queued up and it's not ready to go. Anyways, absentee voting, there's usually three different types of voters there. There's the military voters, which is a very small percentage, but important, as always. And then there's the election day voter, or I'm sorry, the permanent absentees. These are people who have a permanent absentee. They have a permanent excuse. They've decided that they cannot go to the polls, and they get a ballot mailed to them every year. And then you have the temporary absentees, which is kind of starting to go away with the advent of early voting by mail, because temporary absentees, much like early voting by mail, is only 1 year as opposed to more than that. So it's quite the there it is. There's my thing. And so like early voting in person, I said was 17,218. That was about 49.7% of the vote. The early voting by mail was 1,587. That was, let's see here. Well, I don't have the percentages. So, but the mail voting in and of itself was 5.25%, and the early voting was 18.55%. Now, these numbers for early voting include affidavits, which I'll go over there in a second. And then, of course, we have the main way of voting that most people vote, and that's Election Day. 70,601 people voted. And then affidavits. 693 people voted affidavit. Now, affidavit voting is you show up to the polls, whether it's early in person or election day in person. Affidavit is not available for mail balloting. And because we end up resolving your issue usually with mail balloting when you send in your application. But usually it means that you've moved and you haven't updated your address with us before we updated the poll books. So that is the main reason why people have vote by mail ballots, although sometimes people affidavit ballots, although sometimes people request vote by mail ballots and don't turn them in and thus have to do an affidavit ballot. These are ballots that are collected and we don't count them until 7 days after Election Day. They're canvassed, ruled on, and then counted with our last scan that happened a couple weeks ago now, 10 days ago now. So that is what happened with us, with affidavits. And there are 585 people on Election Day did affidavits, 108 people during early voting did affidavits. So to go early voting, including affidavits and in person, was 17,326. That's about 18.55%. Actually pretty high for early voting for a local year. It's the highest it's ever been for a local year, double what it was when it started in 2019. And then mail voting 4,909, 5.25%. That's actually kind of started to wane since the pandemic. More people are choosing to do early voting instead of mail voting, although it's very important for the 5,000 people that did do it. And then, of course, Election Day, including the affidavits that were done on Election Day, was 76.20%. You may think, oh, my God, that's so big. That's huge. And it is. It is the biggest, but it's actually the lowest share for an early voting or for an Election Day that wasn't the pandemic year in 2021. I think that was a little bit less, but in 2020. So we are starting to see kind of what we thought would happen in 2019 before the pandemic, is that early voting would start to grow. Mail voting would stay about the same, although it might grow a little bit now with early voting by mail. And Election Day is starting to wane. So more people are voting with this alternative voting than ever before, than waiting till Election Day. So how did the parties do? Traditionally Democrats dominate by numbers and by percentage the early voting and vote by mail operations. That didn't always be the case, but before 2019, actually Republicans either dominated or definitely had a tactical advantage in the absentee balloting. And a lot of things have contributed to that not being the case anymore. The electorate that is doing absentee balloting is not is not as old as it used to be. Since the pandemic, more people have started to choose that option. So there's that. But also, there's a guy in the White House who's spending all his time talking about how mail balloting is bad. And that's really hurt the Republicans, both on early voting, which they've always been against in New York for some reason. Our former GOP legislature, well, soon to be former GOP legislature, passed a resolution against it. And the Republican commissioners were against it. And, the Republican state legislature and state Senate were against it forever until in 2019 when Democrats took over the state legislature and they were able to implement it, even though it's been implemented in many Republican areas of the country for decades. But so there's always been a kind of a lack of enthusiasm to participate in mail balloting or early voting balloting. But since Donald Trump came into the office, there's been a lack of enthusiasm by Republicans to take part in mail balloting as well. And I go into this in my blog that I released in a little bit more detail. I'm not going to bore you with all the intricacies, but what I showed is that you really have to look at how a party performed relative to their enrollment. And in Onondaga County, Democrats have a higher enrollment, so they're going to dominate by numbers early voting, vote by mail, even election day. But what you have to see is how are they turning out in relative to their registration percentage. That's a real way to look at how a party is motivating their base or their electorate to come out and vote. And Democrats, by and large, by about 13%, overperformed their enrollment in both early voting and election day voting. So that is, that is something that is, really good. The Republicans pretty much tied their enrollment numbers for early and mail voting for this election. You may think that's great, and it's actually not as bad as it used to be. So there is some relative move to these voters to come out and vote in early and mail. At least they're hitting their enrollment numbers. Although, the caveat there is their enrollment numbers have been stagnant or shrinking for the last few years. Actually, if you go back to 2016, Republicans have actually become the third enrolled number here in Onondaga County. So raw numbers are still in trouble. But in relative to their enrollment, if we're looking at how parties turned out their vote, is a good indication. The non-enrolled or unaffiliated, which is people who are not enrolled in a party or enrolled in a party that is no longer recognized, they actually were down by about 12 percentage points for both mail and early voting. So they were 12 percentage points under their enrollment figures. And that's not surprising. In almost every election, whether it's an even year or odd year, unenrolled or non-affiliated voters tend to vote in the least percentage. I really I did in my blog, but I'm not going into today, conservatives and working families, just because their numbers are so small and they tend to go along with their major party counterparts. So I'm not going to get into that, but I did in my blog. So check it out at dustinzardi.com. So, but what about election day? So on election day, Democrats still did very well this election. It used to be that we would underperform on election day, but we actually overperformed on our enrollment by about 6%. That's a pretty good number. Republicans did overperform their enrollment on election day by about 4%. So not great, but not horrible. But in the past, Republicans have really banked on a turnout on election day that would overcome their deficits on early voting and vote by mail. And we have seen this year, and a little bit last year, but mostly this year, that strategy has failed. It absolutely failed this year. It didn't work. The electorate itself was unenthused on the Republican side. Less voters showed up and less election day voters showed up. And by not banking those votes during early voting and vote by mail, there was a lot of people who just decided not to show up on election day. And that hurt them quite a bit. And you saw that in the turnout. The non-enrolled unaffiliated were down by about 8% on election day. So not as bad as early voting and vote by mail. They did tend to come out a little bit more on election day, but they were still below 8% below their enrollment figures. And that's the problem with the unaffiliated voter. They tend not to participate as reliably as Republican and Democratic voters. So that's my brief look at how people voted. I will be relaunching my weekly wonks on Wednesdays. It'll be the first one will be Wednesday, December 10th. And that will be doing some formal looks after we've certified, with charts and graphs and all of that I like to do, some visuals for you. That will start on Wednesday, December 10th. I will look at the alternative voting. Then I'll look at the election day and overall turnout. And then I'll look at how Democrats did. So a 3-part series coming up in December. And then we will finally put, as Christmas Eve arrives, the 2025 election to bed and start looking forward to 2026 in the new year. But I'm going to try to get my weekly wonk back on to the weekly status. I took that off in 2025. I was reevaluating some of the content that I've done. After 2024 and the rough election year we had, we had a lot of changeover here at the Board of Elections, and I wanted to concentrate on getting the right people in the right places, and also kind of retaking a little bit of my private time, because I do all this on my own. But I do enjoy it, and I did miss doing those graphs and data. So I'm going to be setting that back. And I will continue my weekly Commissioner in the Car. Zoom with Zarni will continue to remain on hiatus for the foreseeable future. I just don't think I'm going to be going back to interview sessions. It's not something I enjoyed as much as... and they were also logistically hard to get done. So, and as somebody who's kind of neutral in primaries, I decided, showcasing candidates, not my thing. The 17th Ward is starting to do that. So that's for the Democratic Party. So I really go check out other people who are going to fill that space. So lastly, I'd like to end with what we're going to be doing in the Board of Elections this next week. Well, starting Monday will be our hand counts. We will be hand counting the Solvay 3rd Ward trustee and Onondaga Town Council. We may get that done on Monday, and then hopefully we will have those certified results plus the write-ins on our website, all done. We want to get it done by Wednesday, but Friday at the latest. And then the Onondaga County Board of Elections will officially put the 2025 election to bed. So that's what we have going on at the Board of Elections. We've actually started to do registration again. Registration was on hold from 10 days before the election. And we had about 8,000 what we call mail check cards that came back to us in the mail after June 1st. And so by law, we couldn't process those before the election. Now we can process them and start cleaning up the voter rolls. And we have a goal as when January 1st hits, we are going to have the best voter rolls we've ever had in Onondaga County. All the people who have moved will have been processed, and also the people who have moved out of county and didn't vote in this last election, they'll be processed. So we'll be going into the 2026 election with some of the best data we've ever had. So I'm really proud of the work that the County Board of Elections has done. There's going to be a lot more changeover in the sense of people are moving around to different roles next year. The Onondaga County legislature gave us a upgrade in one of our positions, which is giving us a chief registration clerk, and that's going to allow us to move some people around and put them in different roles and really optimize how we run the Onondaga County Board of Elections. And of course, the even years is going to change a lot of things. So a lot of work to go on for us. We're not going to be taking any time off, although I personally might be taking my vacation once we wrap up this election. But I'll still be doing my Commissioner in the Car, and I'll still be doing my weekly wonks, even if I'm on vacation. So thank you again for following along. Go Bills. Follow along at DustinZarni.com, and you can get all my news and content updates along with my weekly wonk and Commissioner in the Car. You'll get an email notification if you subscribe there. You can follow Dustin Zarni on any of my social medias. I'm on all of them, I think, except for Truth Social. Sorry, Donald. Not going to be joining you there. But that's about it. And thank you again, and enjoy your day. Bye-bye.